So I am Tom, and for the last 20 plus years, I have lived and worked in Alfred running Wolf Pine Farm. We have been primarily a vegetable operation for the first part of our history, and about 10 years ago, I started adding some livestock into the mix. And in the last couple of years, I've become really interested in thinking about how to create new farms and make the best use of some of the land that we have. And about 2 years ago, I connected myself with Mr. Graham Mallory, and we've been scheming things for a long time. And over the course of the last year, we've been working on this project to reclaim some old farmland and turn it into a productive piece of land again. And so that's what this talk is about, is kind of the past, present, and future of this project and other projects, and talking about why would we want to reclaim farmland, and how are we doing it, what are we doing, and what's our vision. So I will give a brief overview of what we'll be talking about tonight, just so you kind of have the 30,000 foot view. So Graham and I already did my brief intro, so I guess I'll pass it to Graham for that. We'll talk a little bit about the big picture of what is happening in New England agriculture. And I personally will talk a little bit about some of the things that I learned about New England agriculture that kind of started me on the path of being inspired to reclaim farmland and do what we're doing. I'll go through how it is that we're executing our idea of going from a beat up old piece of land to hopefully a productive, beautiful working farm. And then we'll get to the Q&A and discussion portion. So I already did that. So I'm gonna pass the torch to Graham for just a minute. And Graham can tell you a little bit about his path to reclamation and working with me and such.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, so I've been farming since I got out of high school, and interested in having my own farm, and apprenticed on a bunch of different places.
He almost apprenticed on my farm. He interviewed here, but
yep,
he made a different choice. I can't believe it.
One of us made a different choice. So anyway, yeah, got interested in having my own farm, and for us, the best way to get into that was to buy abandoned old farmland that had grown up in woods, cut over, really low grade timber, something that doesn't look very attractive to most people off of the street, but we're able to look around and find a place with good soils and good potential. So yeah, our farm, we've been reclaiming and logging it and establishing pastures and fencing and running livestock. And I'm a logger as well as a farmer by trade, and very interested in how those things work together. And yeah, just, I don't know, got to know Tom through mutual friends, and eventually realized we were both really interested in this stuff, and kind of bringing our motivation and our skill sets together to do this on other properties besides mine and his, try and look around and find other farmland that we think has potential, and get something going there and get other people involved with it. And I guess if I want to tell a little bit about my farm, my background is mostly in pasture-based livestock. We raise a lot of cattle here, a lot of hogs, sheep, and chickens as well. And this year we're doing a lot of chickens and hogs for Tom, and we'll tell you more about that. I think that's it.
Great. So just a brief overview of kind of the New England food scene. I've borrowed a lot of these, the statistics that you'll hear about acreage and how to feed ourselves from the New England Food Vision. I'm not sure if you're familiar with this report, but I stumbled upon it several years ago. It was written by a whole bunch of really smart people who are connected to agriculture, who I really admire. And kind of laid out a vision for how New England could do a much better job of feeding itself. And so, so as of right now, it takes roughly 16 million acres of land to feed the population of New England. An important caveat to that statistic is with our current diet. One of the things that the food vision dives into is how we could change our diets to maybe more efficiently use land. And so, so these statistics are all taken based on the way we currently eat. And we can dig in deeper later and talk more about what some other alternatives might be and how those might make this 16 million acre go down a little, 16 million acre number go down a little bit. But ultimately, New England only has about 2 million acres of farmland that's active. And so you can do the math, 2 out of 16, roughly an eighth, give or take, of the food that we eat in New England comes from New England farms. This amount of farmland is down from a peak of about 16 million acres in the late 19th century. There was a whole lot of New England that was cleared at that time. Kind of southern New England had a lot of dairy and cheesy type things going on, and northern New England was doing a lot of sheep, a lot of fiber. It was, in fact, a time that was known as the sheep boom. And so many acres in Maine, for example, were cleared for pasture, a lot of which probably shouldn't have been cleared for pasture. And so that's kind of when agriculture in New England peaked, and it's been steadily declining for the most part, acreage-wise ever since. And so now we're in a situation where we only grow about an eighth of the food that we need to feed ourselves. Yeah, there it is in a picture. So green is what we grow in New England, and red is what we in Maine call the acres away acres. So kind of that leads you to think about land. So 16 million versus 2 million acres. So what can be done? First, it's important to note that, as I said before, maybe 16 million was a little too much, maybe more farmland than New England could sustainably handle. So I would like to be clear at the outset that as an advocate of farmland reclamation, I am not advocating that we need another 14 million acres of farmland to be carved out of New England's forests. Forests are pretty great and important, and I think much of the forests of New England ought to stay as forests. But as I said before, we're only providing roughly about 10% of our food needs. So the question becomes, how do we produce more food in New England? And there are really two different ways that you could tackle this problem. Here's my math. The amount of food that we grow is going to be how much we grow per acre times how many acres we grow it on. And so the two different ways to make that number get bigger are grow more food on each acre or grow on more acres. Of course, those aren't mutually exclusive options. I think both are really interesting and important. I think a lot of the energy of the local food movement in New England is really focused more on option one. We have a lot of the option one, increasing the amount of food we grow per acre, focus on smaller farms with human power that can produce a lot more food on a per acre basis. Groovy things like permaculture and no-till farming, CSAs, farmers markets, all the things that are kind of the cornerstones of the local food movement in New England, I think dovetail nicely with this option one, really producing more food on the land that we use for farmland. And this leads to having a lot more farmers per acre. I think when you look at the census of agriculture, it was like, I don't know if it was 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, but the steady decline in the number of farmers kind of leveled off and actually started to move back up a little bit as all of these sort of small scale farms came on the scene. And so, in fact, that's kind of the story of my farm. I mean, most of what we do here is intensive small scale vegetable farming. We grow just a couple acres of vegetables. We're in the process of converting parts of our vegetable operation over to no-till. Option one is a really important option, but I think that the farmland reclamation ideas that I'm really interested in are really focused more on option two, which is if you conclude that in order to feed New England with a more local diet, we need more acres, where do they come from? And so first thing maybe to observe is that it's really important that we keep currently open farmland as active farms. Maine Farmland Trust, local land trusts. There's this organization I just learned about called Northeast Farm Access that buys up big pieces of land and kind of leases that land back out to farmers. They just bought a really big farm in Unity that I heard about. And so they're actively seeking farmers who want to do something cool on a piece of land in Unity. So when I surveyed the landscape and thought about sort of the farm scene, I saw that these boxes were really well checked. There were really well established organizations that were doing this. I felt really comfortable that good, smart people were in the process of working to make sure that all the open land that is currently farmland was going to stay in farmland. So the path that really attracted me was the making new farms from old path, farmland reclamation. I want to also observe that the details of farmland reclamation are really important. As I said earlier, I personally believe the vast majority, we have 17 million acres of forest in Maine, and most of it ought to stay forested, both because it wouldn't be really all that suitable for agriculture anyway, and because it might currently be a beautiful, well-managed forest. I know that when Graham and I were scouting opportunities and pieces of land that we might want to grab and do a farmland reclamation project on, there was a piece, was it in Unity, Graham, that place that had the really nice woodlot?
Yeah, I think you're talking about the one in Montville on Route 3 with the excellent pine. Yeah. I went and walked. It was Tom had tipped me off to it, so I went and walked it, and it was just like, oh damn, somebody has taken so much care with this woodlot and harvested it in a way that you just don't normally see. And it was, I told Tom about it, and he was just like, no, we don't we don't need to get involved with that. If somebody's already doing that exemplary job, then more power to them.
So with all of that said, some pieces of land really do call out and say, gosh, this ought to be a working farm. And when I first found Graham and didn't have any real pieces of land in mind yet, I made a pilgrimage up to his farm, and he kind of showed me around all the things that he had done on his land for farmland reclamation. And I think kind of near the end of the day, was it Emily that said, hey, there's this piece of land you ought to go look at?
Yeah, in Freedom. And I think we just drove right there.
Yep, we just did a drive-by, and I hemmed and hawed for about a year, and then the lawyers hemmed and hawed for a long time to try to actually allow me to buy this piece of land. But eventually we found this really nice piece of land, which I'll talk about in a minute. So what I want to kind of move into now is just talk about the nuts and bolts of all the different pieces of the puzzle that come together to go from scrubby old piece of land to a really nice working farm. So the first thing you need is the right piece of land. Second thing you need is some money. The third thing you need, in my view, is some farm enterprises that you can establish almost immediately that have strong markets. And I'll talk about that in a minute, because I think you could certainly imagine a model where you're like, oh, here's a great piece of land. It's going to take 3 or 4 years to turn it back into farmland. So we'll buy it and we'll spend 3 or 4 years turning it into farmland, and then we'll have a working farm. That's a really long time for there to be no money coming in to pay the bills on that piece of land. So to me, it was really hard to imagine making this whole model work without that, let's find a business to run component to it. And then the first thing you need is some people to run the business. And in my particular opinion, people who then want to buy this farm and kind of run it as their own. And then I move on to whatever the next cool thing to do is.
Can I interject, Tom?
Yeah, go for it, Graham.
I want to like reiterate what Tom is saying, and you know, being like my age and kind of coming of age, like as the local food movement was really picking up steam and like starting to apprentice on farms in like 2008 to 2010. Like I knew a lot of young people my age who were farming at that time and were apprenticing, and then were maybe getting, you know, management positions on farms and wanting to start their own farm. And, you know, myself included, like trying to figure out how to get things going. And there are a lot of people who came through like the MOFGA apprenticeship program who had like none of these things. You know, this recipe that Tom has got, like there were people who were, you know, maybe they'd been apprenticing and / managing farms, you're getting up to that point where they were pretty skilled and pretty aware of what was going on, but they didn't have land, they didn't have money, and they didn't have a business model or a market or anything. So and I was that guy for sure. And I know a lot of other people who were that guy, and some of them are still doing it and most of them aren't. So, you know, to me, one of the really exciting things about working with Tom is that we're reclaiming farmland, but we're also crafting a vehicle to utilize that farmland and to put somebody on it who can actually make something of it, and to have that predictability baked in to say, okay, I know what I'm doing here, and I know where the money's coming from, and I know what the path forward is, instead of just being, you know, totally in the wilderness, like, what am I supposed to be doing now? Which I think is how a lot of people end up after they've been working on other farms for half a decade or something. So that's all I had to say.
Great. So for me, these are the 4 important points. So I just want to go through each one of them and just talk about how we think about those points. So the first one is finding the right land. So this is a picture of a satellite picture of the parcel that is being worked on right now in Freedom. So about 120 acres. I feel like this satellite photo might be a little bit old. I don't feel like the woods are quite this thick anymore. Well, certainly they're not this thick anymore in the places that you've cut, but I think there's been a wood harvest since this picture was taken. I could be wrong.
Yeah, it's also a summer photograph, and the Google Earth images are from the spring before the ash is leafed out.
Yeah, got it. So I went under contract to buy this land kind of before real estate prices went cuckoo, so that's really nice. It took a really long time to buy there was a lot of challenges with the deed on this particular piece of land. The surveyor told us that it was hands down the worst collection of deeds he had ever seen in his like 30-year career of working on properties. You know, so many references to this piece of land and this guy and this rock wall that doesn't exist anymore. And it took them a really long time to sort it all out. So it was pretty frustrating. So much so, in fact, that the model that we'll talk about later, where Graham raised all the livestock at his farm this summer, was not our original intention. Our original intention was to buy this land early enough and slap a farm, slap a house and hire some farmers and clear the land and have them be working this land in 2021. But at some point it became clear that the closing of this deal was not going to happen soon enough. And I don't know if we've talked about this, Graham. I feel like that was probably a blessing in disguise, having, you know, just letting you have all of Graham will talk about some of the sort of roller coaster ride that he went on this season later on. But the learning curve has been steep, and I think it's the farm manager who we hire is going to be inheriting I've been calling it a mediumly oiled machine. You know, we're not quite at well-oiled status yet, but we're getting there.
We flattened the curve.
So can you guys see my cursor?
Yes.
Great. So this is the road. This is the main road that this piece of land is on, Smithton Road. And we're in the process of building a little cottage right in this little landing here. And the best land on the farm is probably this little section right here. If you look at old photos, you can see how they used to have, I have some aerial photos later in the presentation that you'll see, but you can see how there were clearly pastures. And there's another photo that I sent to Graham last night. I haven't gotten it in here, but I think I found one that even shows this strip being cropped, which is not surprising because the soil profile looked pretty appropriate for that.
And it's also just apparent from looking at the ground. It's obviously been cropped. You know, it's smooth, plowed ground. You know, with rock walls with small rocks in them.
And so this, from an aerial photo, looks like 100 million other woodlots in Maine. So it's a fair question to wonder, how did we, other than Emily knowing stuff, which is also really useful, more generally when I'm scouting, like how are we thinking about appropriate pieces of land? So the next thing that I'm kind of looking for is really good soils. So this is a screenshot of that same parcel from the NRCS soil maps. So green is soil types that are viewed as prime ag soils suitable for cultivation. This light blue is farmland of statewide importance, tends to be pretty good stuff, could be cropped, might be a little bony, might have some other shortcomings that don't make the cut for green. And then red is everything else. Too steep, too wet, too rocky, whatever its shortcomings are. So as you can see, there's a pretty big percentage of potentially really nice farmland. I think as we've thought about this project and thought about the totality of this 120 acres, I think our feeling is that greater than half of it could be some combination of pasture and cropland someday. There's certainly some of it that's just not appropriate for that and should just stay as woods, steep and or wet. But I'd say maybe 70 or 80 of the 120. Does that sound about like the right ballpark to you too, Graham?
Yeah, definitely.
So this is the NRCS soil map website. You can pull that up. I think I have a database of like, some of the towns have a database of the actual individual parcels of land that are sold. And so I can grab those parcels and slurp them up into the NRCS database. So this is actually a pretty good approximation of the boundaries of the farm, but you could also just kind of do this by hand, point and click, and get a pretty rough idea of the piece of land that you're looking at. I know Maine Farmland Trust can help you with this too, if it's a property that's going to be thought of as a potential easement candidate. They have good GIS mapping skills. So excellent soils is a really good clue. But Graham kind of clued me in on another interesting tool to use, which is this picture. And since this was your, you brought this to the table, Graham, maybe you can describe what it is we're looking at here.
Sure. Yeah, happy to do it. This is a LiDAR image. So yeah, I don't know what LiDAR stands for. Lasers. It's lasers that make the image. And those lasers are amazing. And we're not super zoomed in here. So it looks a little wrinkly in this image, but basically the LiDAR sees through vegetation and shows you what is in and on the ground. And it's really excellent. It's used in archaeology, like for finding civilizations in Central American jungles, because you can just, literally from space, you can look right through the vegetation and see stone walls and building foundations and, the lay of the land really clearly. And you can do it with, I don't know if it's anywhere in the world. There are databases online where you can certainly look at any land in the US, but you can really see, former cropland. It's that really smooth looking ground. You can see where there's like steep gullies, and you can see where there's, boulder fields. You can see, stone walls. You can see old discontinued roadways. You can see foundations.
Yeah, so can you see the stone wall right there? That's like,
I mean, I can, but it's a
little
faint.
faint.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but there's
then you can see how smooth it is here. And then in the land across the street, like up here and down here, you can see those are kind of clearly woods that have never been anything but woods. It's all still a lot of topography. And so that's a really good, the old timers had a pretty good idea of what the good land was. So if you have a piece of land that, if you have a piece of land that was never farmland, I'd be hesitant to take it on as a farmland reclamation project. So this tool, and I think, Graham, you've told me that you feel like the farmland soil maps can be a little deceiving sometimes.
Oh yeah, I mean they're like a good guide, but you know they definitely don't tell you everything. There's a lot. I mean, the minimum area is like 6 acres or something. Like anything that's any soil type that's less than 6 acres doesn't even show up on those maps. And
yeah.
there's definitely land that's mislabeled. So like what the LiDAR really shows you is, you know, you can know or have a good idea of what the soil type is based on those soil maps. But looking at the LiDAR, you can actually see what the past land use was. And the biggest clue of that is the smoothness of the ground indicates cropland. And you can literally see every stone wall. And you can see, you know, in places that are completely grown up in woods, you can see where the farmstead was, and you can see the old cellar hole and things like that. So you can know, okay, this is where the house and the barns were. Here's these crop fields. Here's a lane. You know, you can see double stone wall lanes going back from the, you know, from the farm back into the pastures. And the, you know, the farmers who were working this land in the 19th century did a tremendous amount of the work for us by smoothing and rocking the fields. I mean, if we had to pick every rock that they picked, you know, it took them generations to do, and we could do it in, you know, we could do it in a matter of weeks, what they did in a matter of decades, but it is very, very expensive to de-rock fields. So it just gives you a massive leg up if you're starting with former cropland. Even if it's been forested for 100 years, you're already way ahead of the game if it's been cropped before.
Great. And I think kind of the last tool that we use, which usually comes into play after we have used these other tools to find an interesting candidate, is looking at some old aerial photographs. So this is 1956 photo of this same land. So this bend in the road is really useful because it helps to kind of ground you. So I'll go back for a minute. There's that same bend. I can't see it on my screen because the zoom is covering it, but the bend is up here. And so this little triangle, and then this big wedge, and then this triangle here are all part of the land that I have purchased. And you can see that it's hard to tell from this photograph what's going on there.
And the next field south, Tom, is also on the property.
Yep. Yeah, this is the pipeline.
Yep.
This is the hazardous material pipeline. And then this, I think, is a neighbor's property now. This little rectangle here.
Yep.
So yeah, I mean, this gives us, this is kind of what helped inform us that, you know, roughly 2/3 of this could be a farm, because roughly 2/3 of it was a farm. So
can I speak to that a little bit as well, Tom?
Please.
So the really light colored ground, I guess I can't move your cursor, but the really light colored ground, yeah, that and the triangle field and the field to the south, you know, that tends to indicate cropland on these old aerial photos. And then the sort of fuzzier gray looking ground to the left of the triangle field. Yeah, right there. So that is still open ground. You know, that is probably pasture land. And these, you know, these photos from the mid 20th century is when a lot of those pastures were being let go and a lot of them were coming up in trees. But, you know, during this time period, if you're looking at mid 20th century, very often you can see the individual trees, and you can in this photograph. And if you were to zoom in on some of those areas a little to the south of where Tom's cursor is, you can start to see, yeah, like down in there, that's an area that's really been let go in 1956. Like nobody's mowing that or anything. You know, that area to the north looks like it was open and was probably being pastured. Maybe it was being hayed. I'm guessing probably not. But anyway, there's like a gradation between, you know, land that was actively farmed, land that's kind of rough pasture but still being maintained somewhat, and land that's being completely let go. And very often that the chronology of that indicates the quality of the land. You know, they held on to and kept cropping the best land for the longest, and the more mediocre land, maybe they were keeping it open, maybe they were starting to let it go, and then the lowest quality land had already been totally abandoned, usually by the early 20th century. So it's also useful if you're deciding, you know, what steps you want to take or how you want to get started. You can look at these aerials and say, okay, this was the land that was most recently, most intensively cultivated, and usually, you know, that's where you want to start and focus your efforts.
Oh, and also, I think we spoke to this earlier. It's really nice that if you can find land where you don't have, as Graham was describing, a beautiful, well-managed, most awesome forest ever, because to me, that's not an appealing project to whack all the trees down and turn it into a pasture. So one of the nice parts about this parcel is that it had been cut really heavily. I'm pretty sure the vast majority of the trees that you've cut so far, Graham, were ash trees. And so those aren't long for this world anyway, with the ash borer moving into Maine. And then the rest of the property has very little timber on it that would be really merchantable at this point in any meaningful way. So it's a full-blown project to mostly expense. There's not a lot of income coming out of the woods, which is one of the reasons why the land was so cheap. It had been cut over pretty hard, and now it was a it was an estate that owned the land, and they held it and cut the woods and then decided to sell it. I think they owned a bunch of different parcels in town, and this was the last one that they owned. This is actually a picture of Graham's logging from February. This is the what we call Area 1, I think, where the where the first chickens will run next year, we hope.
Yep. Yeah, so it's nice when it's guilt-free logging. You know, this land was it was slated for clear cutting anyway by the emerald ash borer, so it was nice that we could beat the bug to it and get some value out of the timber, and also be utilizing land that, you know, it was on the verge of getting totally overrun by invasive species, because you know, all the ash trees are doomed to die within the next decade or so. And to walk that land and look at the understory, it's mostly Asiatic honeysuckle and bittersweet and Japanese barberry, and just a lot of really nasty invasives that once that canopy gets opened up by the bug killing all the ash trees, you know, they're just going to go nuts and take over. And there's a lot of land in Maine in that category, where the glossy buckthorn and the other invasives are starting to move in, and the trees are susceptible to climate change and or invasive insects. And yeah, it's going to be a big upheaval in the coming decades. So if we can get involved with a piece of property and do something good with it, that feels extra good for sure.
So that was the first bullet on the recipe. So second bullet on the recipe is money. This one's a little bit simpler. So for project one, it's just me taking a big loan and keeping my fingers crossed and hoping that it all works out okay. Then for future projects, we're really, there's a lot of different options on the table. The first option on the table is to take it slow and just wait until project one is done. So the vision is in, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 years, we will have a farm manager with a thriving enterprise who has fallen in love with the land, we hope, and wants to buy it from us. And so when they do, then there'll be a pile of money and we can go find the next piece of land. There's also thought of maybe finding some people who want to jumpstart that a little bit and invest some money. I was led to tackle this project in Freedom in part because I'm on the board of my local land trust. And about 3 years ago, there was a project that kind of caught my eye, and Graham actually came and took a look at it with me. And I tried to convince my board that we should do this sort of groovy farmland reclamation, buy it, make it really nice, and then sell it to a farmer, and they weren't hearing it. So we'll see if the land trust path is a viable one someday. once we've done 3 or 4 projects and show what an awesome idea this is, maybe Maine Farmland Trust will be lining up at our door to actually do reclamation projects themselves. The third ingredient is the farm enterprises. And we're going to talk about the enterprise that we've chosen to focus on and the reasons why we think it's a winning option. There's no reason why you couldn't have any of a number of different enterprises sort of taking the lead here. Maybe not even livestock based, who knows, depending on the nature of the land. But if you're reclaiming recent farmland, it's probably not going to be ready for crops right away. So livestock is really a nice bridge if you eventually want to get to crops anyway. So our enterprise is Pastured Poultry. So here are some chickens at Graham's place this summer. So Graham raised meat birds, and we sold those meat birds to Walden Local Meats. So Walden Meats is a kind of meat box company that operates all up and down the sort of Northeast corridor. I think they go as far down as Washington and all the way up to Portland. And they seem to have an infinite appetite for pastured poultry growers. And so that's really, it's a nice component to this that we know we can, for the time being at least, we can keep adding scale and keep adding new operations and kind of refine this business and turn it into the vehicle for giving new farmers this this business to get them started. In addition to pastured poultry, Graham also raised some pigs in the woods. This is also Graham's farm, some of the pigs that he raised for me this summer. This is like one of the top happiest pig pictures I think I've ever seen. They just look like they're in such a perfect spot for pigness. At this point, we think there's some infrastructure that's needed for raising pigs. And so Graham will probably raise pigs again next summer. I think the new land and freedom will stick to chickens for 2022. And those were the enterprises we tackled together this year. But then other enterprises, depending on the land, you could imagine crops. Cattle is certainly going to call out as something that's going to be worth doing in some of these lands that can be reclaimed for pasture. The really cool part about pastured poultry is that it can really do a lot on a per acre basis. So you wouldn't be able to generate anywhere near the amount of revenue on a per acre basis raising cattle as you would with pastured poultry. And part of that is the magic of what pastured poultry is, which I call it kind of, it's a happy feedlot. Your land is not actually raising the feed for those animals. That feed's coming from away. And so you're able to have a lot more animals on your land, but it also can do a lot of good to your soil with all that chicken manure being dropped. You got some good soil test results recently, Graham?
We did.
Yep. Great.
You want me to talk about those now or at some point?
Sure. You can talk about the chicken soil test.
Let me open it up. Okay, so there it is. We don't have a before from that same pasture where we ran the chickens. Sorry about that. I wish we had one from years ago, but we don't. But anyway, it's looking really super good. We're psyched with how the soil pH has come up. Like I said, we didn't have a test from that exact area, but in general, our soil pH, our starting pH on most of our farm was more like around 5.4. So that's pretty cool to see that coming up without any lime application. Phosphorus, we're getting up into the medium range, even a high medium. We've never put down any fertilizer of any sort. So that's all just from the chickens. And I expect to see that number go up more as the manure fully breaks down and incorporates. Right now, a lot of it is sitting on the soil surface, after this growing season. But next year, once the pasture starts growing through it, I think we'll be seeing more phosphorus in the soil test. Potassium's off the charts, which is like amazing, for what had just been woods really recently. Really good calcium saturation. And this is, my wife does nutrient analysis and nutrient planning for work, and so for her to look at this stuff, and it's like, yeah, this is already looking like farmland, not like forest land. So it's nice to see how far we've come in a really short amount of time.
Yeah, so we were just talking about the different farm enterprises. We went over the Pastured Poultry, where we're sending meat birds to Walden. I think I may have neglected to mention, but my slide reminded me that the pigs that Graham raised were all going to meat shares for my farm. One of the things I did this year was took at least a year hiatus from actually raising livestock myself so that I could be more focused on getting this new project up and running. And so then, yeah, someday it could be cattle, could be crops. One of the notes I made here is that I think future enterprises, whoever these farm managers are and future farm owners, we hope, I would want to see what their interests and passions are. And there's going to be a big piece of land that has a lot of possibilities. And so kind of coming up with ideas together and not having too rigid of an idea of what comes next. It seems like it will work well and give them a say in what other enterprises they might want to add over time. And so the final ingredient to the magic recipe here is the people to do the work on a day-to-day basis and hopefully buy the farm. So we're going to split this up into two sections. The first section of the people doing the work is our 2021 section, which is Mr. Mallory. And so Graham, you can, I'm trying to remember what my slides say. Yep, so Graham raised chickens and pigs. Graham also worked on building a cottage for the farm managers. Graham also did a lot of work in the woods so that we could be ready for 2022. You can imagine Graham had a busy summer. And so I think that's the last slide for you. Yeah. So Graham,
Yeah,
if you want to talk a little bit,
I can take over.
Want me to relinquish the screen again?
Yeah, I could take it over and show some pictures of what we did at my place. So anyway, yeah, we like Tom said, it was taking a long time to close on that Freedom property, and you've got winter to deal with. So at some point in the fall of 2020, we just decided, why don't we do year one, sort of our first, beta year, testing out all of these enterprises, building out our production infrastructure. Let's do that at my place this summer. I was at a point in my life where I was ready to get back into farming more after having taken a bit of a break when our kids were born. So that worked out nicely. And so, yeah, we raised, pastured broiler chickens for Walden Meats. I don't know how to, do you see my cursor dancing around?
Yes.
I gotta just stop the share, I guess. Sorry about that. I don't know how to just go to the next image. What do I want to show you next? I guess I'll start with the production image so you can see what what it looked like when we were actually running them outside. Okay, yeah, so this is our main thing. Like Tom said, we raised hogs as well. We raise hogs on pasture. We mainly fence them using like that. That works really well. That's something that we'd already done for years, something we like doing a lot, and didn't have much of a steep learning curve, has a lot less infrastructure involved than doing the chickens. But it's also, we're limited by how much we can market. Tom's got his market for pork there. With the chickens, we're selling them to a distributor, and they, like Tom said, maybe don't have an infinite appetite, but we certainly haven't hit bottom yet. So we were able to ramp up a pretty sizable chicken operation. What did we do? 7 batches of 1,100 birds this year, so almost 8,000 birds in total. We built all of these, what I've been calling the hoop coops, these hoop houses on skids that are ventilated, and they have watering and feeding infrastructure installed with them. We've been moving the buildings around on pasture using this skid steer that we bought for the purpose. And yeah, like Tom said, it's been there's been a really steep learning curve. There was a lot of kinks we had to work out, especially early in the season when we were still figuring out all the details of, how to have water pipes without airlocks, and whether to pull with a cable or push with a eye bar, or all those details. But we sorted out a lot of stuff, and we raised a bunch of nice chickens, and pretty happy with it. So let me just show you some other images from the year so you can kind of see what some of that looked like. So that's an image of our brooder building. This year we were brooding in one of these tunnels. So you can see these are the baby chicks. And these buildings were stationary. There's a propane tank in the corner for a heat source, and they're bedded with pine shavings. And that was hiccupy. And next year we're excited to build a better brooding facility. Okay, so there's a little bit bigger view of the pasture. So you can kind of see a little bit of what's going on here. You've got, some bare ground in the foreground where the houses had recently gone over. And with our pasture being a pretty new seeding, especially, the chickens really hammer it on a pass, and there's not much green left behind. But in subsequent photos, you'll see what it looks like after it gets a chance to recover. But yeah, you can see me in the background, I guess, lugging around a poultry crate for some reason, and the skid steer. You can see that black tote there. That's what we use for bringing grain out to the pasture, and we're bucket feeding in the individual buildings. And you can kind of see the landscape that we're creating here. When we logged the place, we left a lot of trees. We're trying to create kind of a silvopasture environment where it's not just totally open grassland. There's a lot of trees left behind for all the environmental and wildlife benefits and aesthetic benefits that they provide. So that's what that looks like. So I'll show you a nighttime shot. Whoops. Gotta open it. Oh, look, it opened right there. Can you see it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yay. All right. Yeah, so that's what creating the birds looks like. This is actually an example of moving the birds from the pasture, from the brooder building out to pasture. Typically handle the birds at night because they roost and they're calmer at night. So yeah, that's what it looks like. We got the skid steer out there with pallets. We try and palletize everything on the farm as much as possible and move it around with forks, because most of farming is moving around bulky things. So yeah, we use the forks on the skid steer for everything from moving water tanks to the feed bins to chicken crates stacked on pallets. We use the forks for moving the pasture buildings. So yeah, that's a huge efficiency thing for us. But anyway, that's what that process looks like. And let's see, we got some results. Yeah, is that one just going to show up for you? Yeah. So yeah, here's an example of the kind of pastures that we're able to grow following the buildings. This is our sheep flock, and just grazing some, 5-star, 10 out of 10, best pasture we could ever hope to grow, really. And yeah, it's from a combination of frost seeding and chicken tractors, basically. This photo is probably taken in September sometime. And we're really super happy with the results. Does that sound good? Yeah.
That's a beautiful picture right there.
Yeah, that's what we're working towards. Okay, I'm going to stop share.
Great. I guess I will take back over. The slick little house that is being built mostly by Graham in Freedom at this new property. Apparently, we are really fond of things that are 16 feet wide and 24 feet long, because that's the dimension of all of our hoop coops and the dimension of the small cottage that we're building for the farm managers to live in. So in 2022 on this land, Graham is going to continue working in the woods. We're going to identify what are the next best places to work on reclaiming some farmland. And that as we get a farm manager involved, they will start participating in that conversation as well as we figure out what's coming next. Depending on what you want to do with the land, you may need more or less preparation from coming from the work in the woods. Just today, the company that's doing some forestry mulching to clean up the stumps that you saw and the slash that you saw in that earlier image of the logging, they just came and started doing that work in Freedom today. So they're kind of the lawnmower of the woods has started doing its job and is turning those fields back into what really looks like fields again. It's so recent, I don't think we have any pictures to share with you, but
No, sorry.
Graham did a video chat with me today. It's pretty slick to see. So in 2022, we're going to continue working in the woods. As I've mentioned, we're going to hire a farm manager or farm managers to live in the cottage and manage our pastured poultry operation. Over time, we'll add, I think, assuming that there's interest in both directions, we'll add more enterprises. Who knows what those will be. And then we'll sell the farm. So once we got it humming, I do not want to own another farm in Freedom. I am happy with my farm here in Alfred. So once we've built it and turned it into something cool, then hopefully these farm managers will want to buy it. But if not, we'll sell it to somebody else. And then repeat as many times as we want. And that is all that we have for the kind of more formal slideshow. This is my shameless self-promotion or farm manager promotion materials. So if you know anybody who sounds like a good fit for this job, we're still interviewing, going to start interviewing candidates soon to live and work in Freedom next year. So Graham, unless you have closing thoughts, we can kind of slide into the discussion Q&A portion of the talk.
That sounds great. I don't really have anything else to say other than I'm excited to hear some questions and give more details.